Coming up, what do you want out of life? Nobody's actually sat me down and said, or if somebody has asked me this before, I've been conditioned to feel selfish for having any wants or needs or desires. I've been conditioned to feel guilty if I'm not thinking first of my husband and my children. We've been conditioned so they don't dare to answer that question in fear of sounding selfish or greedy.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, mamas.
Welcome back to Raising Mama.
I'm Megan.
And I'm Chelsea.
I'm a divorced mama of 2 toddlers, sharing custody while running my own business.
And I'm a full-time nurse, pregnant with my second baby, and married to a stay-at-home dad.
Join us while we talk about the most pressing issues related to postpartum and new parenthood.
This podcast is brought to you by Raising Mama, a bamboo baby brand dedicated to empowering moms during postpartum and raising awareness about maternal mental health. Raising Mama's buttery soft bamboo pajamas aren't just designed to help babies sleep better, they're made to support mothers too. And for every pair sold, a portion of the proceeds is donated to Postpartum Support International. As a thank you for listening, enjoy 20% off your next order with code RaisingMamaVillage at checkout, because we're all in this together.
Today, we are talking about the struggle of finding purpose and fulfillment as a new mom. Now, most people would say that being a mom is the most fulfilling thing you can do with your life. However, as motherhood emerges onto us, it's not an uncommon feeling to feel like maybe you've lost yourself, you're not being your best version of yourself, and you really start to ask, what is it that makes me happy? What kind of mom do I want to be? So we're going to have an excellent speaker who asks this question to new moms all the time and has, a step-by-step way of kind of guiding people to being their very best selves. But before we get into all that, Megan and I, we're going to just share a little bit of what makes us feel like our motherhood is purposeful and what fills our cups. So Megan, take it away. What makes you, how did you even find your purpose or your fulfillment?
Okay. So it's funny. It's kind of fun talking about this now that I'm on the other side. And I really feel like I have found my purpose and wrapped my head around what the heck it means, like for Megan being a mom in this world, but also being a very career-driven and goal-oriented person. But it was not always easy. It was, in fact, crushingly difficult, because when I became a mom, the biggest thing that hit me, it was just like this feeling of shock, right? And at the time, the shock was most surrounding kind of like the little things in my day. And I've talked about this before, but like just the fact that like I couldn't do what I wanted to do whenever I wanted to do it. And I remember like while I was pregnant, I was like, okay, like it's my last month or whatever. I really need to like go to Target right now or like go do whatever I want because I won't be able to do it. So it's like I knew that it was going to happen, but it was still a massive shock. And I think it was also the permanence of it. Like I'm always going to need to, like, I couldn't just, sounds so lame, but I couldn't just like work for a block of time without needing to do something else. And of course you feel that the most at the beginning because you've got a little baby at home with you, you haven't sorted out like daycare, childcare, whatever it is, to sort of get some of that alone time back, which will mimic your old life. And we all joke too about we have to live our entire adult life, like after the kids go to bed. But anyway, so that was like the biggest shock for me. But then there were these other like factors too. I felt like having kids was a very existential experience because you're bringing life into this world. You've produced another being and you're responsible for taking care of that being. And there were a lot of also on top of that, there's layers here. So sorry, I'm going through the layers, but there was another layer of like looking back on my own childhood, because I was going through very stressful moments with, my breastfeeding disorder, a crying baby, lots of tasks to do, managing the shock, like just getting used to like this whole new experience. And so I'm like, wow, like what am I like as a person, like under stress, and what happened in my life that like led me to respond in this way. So it was a period of quite a long period, I'd say 3 years or so of self discovery in that way. It was like I was like rediscovering myself, who I was. And then part of that was also discovering what I wanted, which took so many questions that I had to ask myself in terms of like what brings me joy, and uh, how I wanted my life to be. So it was an unraveling, and I think that that's how I eventually got there, is doing a lot of research, going to therapy, eventually hiring an emotional healing guide, which I know sounds crazy. We got a whole episode about that. And just, yeah. And also just deciding like, kind of like going back to the basics of like, what do I want to do right now? And then that's like the baby building blocks. And then they kind of got bigger and bigger from there. And then once I could also realize what the problem was and like why I was feeling anxious and why I was feeling depressed, and like really getting to the root of it, then I could make like actionable steps towards like how to get there. So that was my journey. And I it's totally different for everyone.
For you, it was like motherhood's what shook you up, turned your world upside down. And then a lot of introspection is what got you to feel that sort of serenity of like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
this is what I like. This is who I am. That's the type of mom I'm going to be. So that it wasn't just all this craziness happening at you, but it was like you sort of surfing the waves of motherhood and your life and finding that like new normal that makes you feel fulfilled and happy.
Yeah. But keep in mind, I was a CEO at the time. Like Gina talks about in this episode, she talks about like being the CEO of your life. It's like I was a CEO when I became a mom. And that's not everyone's experience, but I think it certainly shaped mine, because I had to shift from being career driven to being family driven. But it's not like I had figured my career out either. It's like I didn't want to be in that career forever. And becoming a mother helped me decide what career I did want to go in. But like, how is it for you, Chelsea?
I'm such a weirdo, so maybe nobody's going to relate to this. But for me, always a big cornerstone of my purpose is service. So I do feel like for me to have purpose and be fulfilled, I need to be giving service. So I'm a nurse, big service. I provide daycare, low income housing, service. And I feel like if you're living this life and you're building this empire, you're going to die, so what are you building it for, right? It's for the next generation. So I feel like children for me is always this like act of service, right? It's like, how can you best use your small time on earth so that what you do, echoes for eternity. And a big part of that is like the legacy of the next generation. Like, do what you can now to help those down the road. Now, I don't even think you necessarily need children in order to keep a legacy going. I mean, it can be through community and many other avenues, but I just felt like, man, I have a lot that I'd love to give. There's a lot that I would love to keep this goodness rolling and going. So for me, motherhood is a big responsibility of service, and like that's my purpose in life. I guess, like my purpose is never to be like, let's see how drunk I can get and like have so much fun and then just like fizzle out. I think that I do a lot of weird things. I do Day of the Dead, and Day of the Dead, they have like 3 deaths. One's like your death, one's your funeral, and then one is when nobody who has known you or loved you remembers you or your story. So I think that like cycles repeat a lot. And if you don't understand the history, if you don't talk about stories, if you don't pass on traditions, like things can, like in the Dia de los Muertos way, end forever, and also good things can end. So that's
Yeah,
kind of where my brain is at, this huge ethereal, me.
Yeah, and I think that finding your purpose, as a mom definitely brings up those questions, because you're also entering like sort of the like middle years of your life. Like you had your childhood and then you had your kind of free to do whatever you want with the little money that you have in your 20s, but then your 30s, like you're moving to the middle of the life and you're thinking more about the rest of your life and the tail end of your life and like where things are going to go from there. So I think it's natural that you're trying to create a legacy for yourself. But the problem from, the service to your children that you're now doing, and wanting to build this legacy is that also you have to like take care of yourself. So,
Yeah.
And that's the tough part is like, how are you supposed to find fulfillment if you're also not taking care of yourself? It's a mad balance. And Gina's an interesting human because she lives in Utah. Chelsea and I live in California. All right. She lives in Utah. She's got a different like upbringing than we do. I mean, not just because she lives in a different state, but like what I think is so rad about her is that she's working with a community of people that, are predominantly stay-at-home moms and, where family is like number one and they're having, having children is like a huge priority. And many of them are having children very young. And what I think is so rad is like, she's a businesswoman. She's got her podcast. She's got her company, Revitalized Womanhood. And she's helping women who are, really haven't thought about some of this stuff. And she goes to tell her own story too. And a lot of times they haven't thought about it because they're also just like really young, but helping them find purpose and fulfillment within their, family driven life. And I think that she's, kind of doing the Lord's work in a lot of ways. And she has some really fascinating insights and really interesting story in terms of how she had her realization, because it wasn't with the first kid. So we hope you like this episode. Definitely a great episode if you're grappling with this stuff right now. And let's get into it. Before we dive in, hit the subscribe button for more expert insights and honest conversations on Raising Mama podcast.
On today's episode, we welcome Gina Trimmer, founder of Revitalized Womanhood Movement. Gina is dedicated to connecting women who aspire to be effective mothers, wives, business owners, and community leaders. Through the Revitalized Womanhood podcast and exclusive membership community, Gina inspires women to pursue purpose-driven lives beyond traditional labels. She'll share insights on building supportive networks and introduce us to her 90-day firing method, a transformative tool to help women identify and act on their life's key objectives. If you've ever wondered how intentional living can unlock your full potential, this episode is for you. Welcome, Gina.
Welcome, Gina.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm excited to talk to you ladies. This is so fun to have it 3 across. I love it.
Yes. We're so excited to have you. And I had the lovely opportunity to be on your podcast. And so I've, learned a bit about you already and what you do. And I just felt like your mission resonated so profoundly with me. And that's why I was so stoked to talk to you. But you talk about, women living intentionally and fully in their purpose. And I was just curious, like what does that mean to you? Because we've talked about like what it means to me. And I kind of went into my, my story and starting Raising Mama, including this podcast. But what does that mean to you personally?
Personally, it happened. It came about. I didn't realize it until it had happened. When the recession hit, my husband and I, we lost everything. We lost our home, all of our cars. We were living really well here in Southern Utah. And we were expecting our first baby. We were basically just keeping up with the Joneses, high overhead with our businesses. And of course, so we were at the end of the day, I think $650,000 plus in debt between the businesses and personal debt, which we couldn't go bankrupt. We had to figure out a way to just work with that and figure it out. Well, so here we are, pregnant with my first baby, living in his grandparents' basement. And my husband comes to me and he says, "What do you want out of life?" And we were older, not well, in the world's terms, we were normal. But for Utah, you're usually married at 19 and having kids by 20. But we were about 25, I think, 25, 27. And I was kind of caught off guard because I'd never been asked that. Do you know what I mean? Other than when I was a child, little girl being asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" or blah, 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 or just a vague recognition of what you want to study in college, right? But not really, what do you want out of life? Because we've been living this way. What do you see for yourself? And I was like, babies and to be a wife and have a nice house. I am a firm believer on we don't know what we don't know. So we are all taught from example, right? So my mother, who was a stay-at-home mother of 8 children, grew her own garden, always made our dresses for dances. She was just this amazing rock star homemaker, absolutely just devoted to my dad. That's my example, right? And other women have an example of executive mothers that go to work and they're powerhouse CEOs or whatever, and they encourage them to get to college and those kinds of things. So you've got what you've been exampled, and then each generation gets a little more, right? A little more expanded. So I'm like, I want to have babies and be your wife and have a nice house, right? and he's like, "What if we traveled the world?" And I'm like, that's an option? Like, that was so beyond anything to me. That was his thing. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds cool. Let's do that. But that was my first experience of someone actually coming to me and sitting me down and saying, "What do you want out of your life?" And so fast forward, here we are, how many years later? 8+ years later. And now I'm asking women that same question, and they have the same look in their eye, like, "What? Nobody's asked me this before. Nobody's actually sat me down and said," or if somebody has asked me this before, I've been conditioned to feel selfish for having any wants or needs or desires. I've been conditioned to feel guilty if I'm not thinking first of my husband and my children. Right? We've been conditioned. So they don't dare to answer that question in fear of sounding selfish or greedy or, right? And that's just not the case. It's quite the opposite, actually. I think it's a necessity. I think because women don't do themselves this courtesy of sitting down and saying, "I want this out of life. I expect this out of my marriage. I expect this out of motherhood," whatever. I think the disservice is, and then they end up floating, just letting life happen to them. That was my post today was, is your to-do list running you, or are you running your to-do list? It's a total difference.
Yeah. I feel like, for one, my first thought was, what a gem of a husband to have asked you that, because I did not have the same experience. Right. And that was like part of why I'm here now, because I didn't have a supportive partner that even like cared about what I wanted, or had, or let's just say at best was not interested in it. Maybe right. Not like didn't care, but wasn't interested. And so And I think that motherhood amplifies this a little bit too, because you said that you were pregnant with your first when this kind of happened, and when he asked you that question. So how did that factor come into play? Because he's saying you want to travel the world, but you're also expecting, and then you're also in a financially very stressful situation.
Right.
So how did that unfold?
Right. So for me, it was never, luckily, because I was raised in such a humble, my mom stayed home, my dad worked. So we had one income, 8 kids. And her background was being raised way more humbly than that on a farm with 6 kids and helping raise her siblings. And so and like I explained to you guys before we started the show, I was the fourth. I was independent. I was an adventure seeker. I was just like, I've got to figure things out for myself. Yeah, I've got to figure it out for myself. So I've never really had this connection to materialistic things like people expect when you lose your home, you're devastated because you've lost your home. But to me, I'm like, it's like I can get another home, right? So luckily, I really didn't care that we were losing everything. And I had to like explain that to him as well, that I'm okay with this. Actually, I found it cleansing. Honestly, I found it very cleansing. And to have a new baby on the way, it was kind of that same spirit of this is just the next adventure. And I saw what it was doing to him. I saw the depression he went into. He did not recognize it. He didn't even know it was happening. I was watching it happening. I was trying to be as supportive as I could, like, we got this, we're going to be fine. Because I knew we would be. I've lived on so little that I knew we would be fine. So I don't know. I think it's something you're born with, but also it did have because of my upbringing, played a part in that as well.
Did you have when you became a mom, did you have kind of an identity struggle as well? Or because you were kind of also going through all of these other things, like it was just a natural part of this transition. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You know what's actually really beautiful about that? And I'm sure I've thought about this because it was kind of the whole reason that Revitalized Womanhood exists, is with my first one, it kind of helped me be very, very present with him and motherhood, and not worrying about the fancy nursery, not worrying about the stuff, not worrying about, like I could really be super present and intentional with him. Plus I was working full time as an emergency dispatcher because I was the one that had a job. My husband didn't have a job because the construction industry was kaput, right? So I was busy focusing on that. And it just allowed me to be very super ultra present with how beautiful these tiny moments are, that the adventures are in these moments. They're not necessarily, you guys, I've been to Paris, I've been to 68 countries. Yes, there are extravagances and beautiful, amazing things to see. And those are adventures. But guess what? The most beautiful adventures we have can be captured in your everyday life at home. And so it wasn't actually until my third baby, which I don't know if it was my age, I was 39 at the time, or it was 18 plus hours of horrible labor followed by an emergency C-section, trauma. And I then had suffered postpartum depression. So that was the crossroads when I went, what the am I doing? And who am I? So I think it was until my third one that happened.
Interesting.
The thing that's like so coming to my mind that Gina, you're speaking to it, and I think Megan, you're speaking to it, is they did this big study. I think it was actually in Britain, where, because they're slightly more caste system-y than we are, or I guess class system. And they were seeing who had the most stress, right? So they were suspecting that it was going to be the CEOs, that it was going to be, the Wolf of Wall Street, like, the president, like the prime minister, right? People with huge responsibilities, And these are extremely stressful jobs. And they did all this stress tests. They test cortisol levels, blah, 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 blah. And lo and behold, the absolute least stressed people in general were these people that were CEOs or whatever. And the most stressed people, the number one most stressed people were the folks, I don't know the term, but like the cleaners. So there's cleaners, especially in like hospitals and stuff, where they just kind of have to wait for their phone to buzz, and then they have to like clean a room, and then their phone can buzz and they have to clean a room. And they found that the most common thing of what is really stressful is if you feel you have control over your life. So like if you're the person who's like, you know what? I'm going to have a newborn and go travel 68 countries, but you feel like you're in control of the decisions and you're in control of the variables, that can feel far less stressful than the sort of just like passively, I guess I buy a house, passively, I guess I do this mother thing, passively, like I think, and then, or on the flip side, if you're like, yeah, man, okay, 3 babies in, I want to join those magic moments. This is what I want to do. But you feel like you have control, like it's your choice. Like I'm here to play with my kid during these small moments. That mindset is huge. And I think it's something that women especially can miss because we are so conditioned, like you said, from just what we know. And anyway, it was something that just really sparked. I was like, oh yeah, like you're talking about, for one person, thinking about a woman traveling with a newborn is like, the most stressful thing. Oh my God, you're losing your house. Oh my God, and it's like,
Right.
it was actually probably one of the most awesome times of your life. And you're about to have a 4th kid, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I bet this is going to be the most awesome time. You are like seasoned, you know what you
Oh,
want.
my heck. You have
Like,
no idea. We are so excited. It's a
yeah.
girl. We are so excited. We have 3 boys. This is our girl. But you know what? You nailed it, Chelsea. You absolutely nailed it, because when I was, before we lost everything, I've always had a good life. Always. Always, always, always. I talk to my women in my community about good, better, best. I'm not coming to you saying your life is crap. You need the sisterhood. You need our community because your life is crap. You need to be better. No. I've always had a good life. Even when we lost everything, I would have never, ever, ever thought to myself, well, this sucks. This is crap. I still had a good life. I had a good husband. We had a safe, warm place to live. We were eating ramen noodles every night, but that's all right with me. And I had this beautiful new baby boy, and he was healthy, which was a blessing because he was a NICU, a 9-pound NICU baby. And, so we had all of these things going on where people would be like, actually, I'm reading the Miracle Morning right now. And he says the 2 lowest lows of his life were, 1, he almost died. He got in a horrible car accident. He almost died. And so the recovery from this was the lowest of lows. Then his second rock bottom was the recession. He lost everything in the recession. And I'm listening to this and I'm hearing my husband's pain. I'm hearing everything that he was going through, the same thing. And he says, I contemplated suicide in that second event. That was the worst, the lowest low. You would think it would be coming so close to death, but no. I had people there supporting me, encouraging me. You can do this. Versus the recession, it was like, this is your fault. We're not here to support you through this. Like, things happened and you got to get yourself out of it. And he said, just the guilt and the weight of that, the emotional burden and stress and anxiety over that was just so much worse.
All right, we're going to pause the show for just a minute because I want to share something personal with you. After having my first baby, I felt completely unprepared for how challenging postpartum life would be. I quickly realized that society just doesn't give moms the support we deserve. That's why I created Raising Mama, to make those early days just a little bit easier. Raising Mama pajamas are made from the softest bamboo fabric, engineered with micro gaps to help babies sleep better and give mamas a much needed boost. The prints feature uplifting messages like, Mama, I wished for you, and it's okay to ask for help. Phrases that are meant to prevent those negative thought cycles that so many of us struggle with during postpartum. And because you're a listener of this podcast, I want to give you a special 20% off with the code Raising Mama Village. Plus, every time you buy a pair, we donate $1 to Postpartum Support International to support maternal mental health. Thank you for being a part of this journey with us. Now let's get back to the show.
I always considered my life was good. But when my husband came to me and said, but I never had really I was never in the driver's seat.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? I was letting life come as it came. I graduated high school, so the next step is college. So I found a college that I knew I could afford, and I got a partial scholarship to, and it was close to home enough, far enough away, close enough, blah, 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 blah. Came down here, and then I did the next step, which was get married to my high school sweetheart. Then that didn't work out. And then, life was just kind of happening.
Right.
I was just allowing life to happen. You have to get a job. You have to pay bills. You have to... And so it wasn't until my husband sat me down and said, I'm putting you in the driver's seat. What are we doing with our lives? Do we want to stay here? Do we want to work a 9 to 5? Do we want to be keeping up with the Joneses? We live in this town like everybody else, and we get a boat, and we go on one vacation a year. And that's fine. That's beautiful. Some people love that. That is great. We have a lot of people that say we could never do what you do. And we're like, yeah, well, we could never do what you do. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is he put me in the driver's seat. And that allowed me to feel like I now have control over what's happening. And so you nailed it. And that's exactly probably what happened, because with my third baby, it was taken away from me in so many different ways. So we came home. We'd been traveling with our 2 boys for 2 years at the time. And so December of 2019, we decided we wanted to have another baby. So we came home, and with the purpose of getting pregnant, having another baby. Well, March happens, 2020, boom, COVID. And we're like, oh, well, okay, we're home now. This is us. We do this, and we do online schooling with our kids. And now I'm pregnant during a pandemic that I'm terrified of. We're all of these things were so out of our control. We couldn't live the way we wanted to live. We had no information. We were scared of everything, And then giving birth is not the way that I had done it 2 times before. It was terrifying. And actually, the most horrible thing that happened is both of my boys, before we left to the hospital, hugged me, and both of them said, "Don't die." Both of them. How weird is that? What a weird thing to have let's see, how old were they? 2020. So 4 years ago. So to have my 9-year-old and my 6-year-old say, "Don't die." And I was like, I didn't really think of it at the time, but then all of a sudden, here we go 20 hours later, and they're like, "We have an emergency C-section. We have a problem." And I just start bawling. And I told Rick, I'm going to die. This is it. My boys had this connection to this other world, and they know that their mom is going to die. And I'm like freaking out. Anyway,
no.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then to come out of it and be so grateful and thankful, whatever, but look over at this baby in his little glass box and have zero me left. Like the Gina before, you guys, I work with brands. I have brands sending me stuff all the time. I love it. I'm a travel mama. I had his nursery totally set up. I was taking pictures. I was posting all the things. I had all of these little outfits from these brands. I had copper pearl swaddles. I had all of these things that it's his announcement. You got to do the announcement picture. You got to have blah, 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 right? And that's normal Gina stuff. That is, before we started, I told you, I'm like, I got to make the nursery. I got to get everything ready, right? That's total normal me. And I looked over at this baby and I'm like, I got nothing. It was just nothing. And I'm like, whoa. And I start crying and the nurse comes in. She's like, what is wrong? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. And luckily, I had heard a podcast with a woman sharing her story about postpartum depression. And up until that point, I thought postpartum depression was wanting to harm yourself, wanting to harm your children, harming your children. I thought it was this extreme. And I'm like, well, that's not it. But luckily, I had heard this woman just talking about kind of what I was feeling, that I was just like a disconnected version of myself. Like, I still want this baby. I still love and snuggle this baby. Like, we came home and my bed was an island and nobody else everybody else be damned. Like, this is us. But if I hadn't heard her sharing that, I would have never known that, oh, and so that's what I said to this nurse. I was like, I think I have postpartum depression. And I'm explaining to her, I don't want to do this, blah, blah. And she's like, I'll get him dressed. I'll take the picture. And bless her heart, thankfully, that sweet nurse came in and took over, because now I have these beautiful, beautiful pictures of him. But other than that, so that was absolutely what you're saying, is those choices, my life, my everything I had known up until that point of control over my mind, my body, my what was happening in my life, was all of a sudden gone. It was still being dictated for me from the government. It was still now being dictated by my hormones. It was now being, right? Mm-hmm. Everything was taken away. And so absolutely that went into an identity crisis, 100%.
And I think that's the most common thing that we know from all mothers who go through it. And I think at some point, whether it's your first, second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever, it happens. Right. But I feel like the struggle is, you work with lots of women, so I think you know this answer. You're really lucky to have this super adaptive husband who like ebbed and flowed with you, let you even be in the driver's seat and support your dreams. But like, what do you say to the women who try to kind of really think about what they want, and then when they say it, like they're not supported? What do you say to those women?
That's huge. I absolutely do have those women. And actually, it is hard because I do not, it's not my place to say, oh, your husband's a D-bag, get a divorce. Right. That's not like, I'm not some man hater. I know. Right. Yeah. I'm
it's it's not our place either.
It's not my place to tell you that your husband's a douche, but I'm just like, no, there's two sides to every story, right? It's glass houses. I'm not in that marriage. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what she's doing to him. I don't know the resentment, the history. I mean, we know so much trauma comes from so many things that it's such a thing. But my advice has always been, what can you control? Work on that. You can control yourself. Obviously, unless there's abuse or something that is like an obvious, you need to seek help, right? I worked with so many women. I didn't work with them personally, but I was an emergency dispatcher for 6 years. I watched so many women come through the system of abuse, domestic violence, blah, blah, blah. And okay, you can't talk to him. You can't speak to him. You can't. And then the next day, she's black and blue. We've got pictures of her black and blue bloodied. And then the next day I won't press charges. He can come home. And I'm just like, but you have to separate yourself from that. That's their path. That's not my path. But for the women that come in through here, luckily, I have not had any experiences with something so dramatic. But there are absolutely husbands, and to no fault of their own as well, because I do think that society has also conditioned them and their fathers before them and their grandfathers before them to be this.
Hands down. Yeah.
Yeah, that they're told not to show emotion. They're told not to communicate. They're told to just get up and figure it out and don't cry and suck it up. And, so for the men who are not willing to grow, continue to grow. Luckily for me, my husband was maybe not necessarily willing to grow in a personal way, but he was wanting to grow in an entrepreneurial way and a business way. So he was reading so many books like Tony Robbins and Tim Ferriss and like all of these amazing entrepreneurs. But in their messaging is also the self-development. You cannot be a successful entrepreneur if you are not a successful human being. So he wasn't, even though he wasn't necessarily seeking out the self-help, it influenced him. So yes, I am lucky in that way. But for the women that are not so lucky in that way, that their husbands have not begun that journey, all I can say is you work on yourself. You work on yourself, and hopefully you being able to learn so much more about yourself and connect with yourself in these ways will give you the guidance you need. It will tell you where your next path needs to go, right? That's a woman who is listening to those things will know this is not healthy. This is not okay. And then it'll break by itself. I mean, I have nothing to do with it. Or it will help her then too, because has she been communicating to him? Has she been trying to say, or is she nagging at him? There's a concept of, my friend Trina is a coach, and hers is all about the language of men, learning the language of men. So concepts such as, imagine your day and you're just like, the kids are just driving you crazy. You didn't sleep very well. You're not taking care of yourself. You're burned out. You're overscheduled, overtired, overworked, undervalued, underappreciated, right? And your day is just like frazzled. Your week has been just a nightmare. And your husband comes home. And so instead of being able to communicate to him, husband XYZ, you are, "Huh!" You vomit, explode emotion all over this poor man. And he's just like, you're crazy. That's all he can, it's like, you're crazy, which is horrible. That's horrible because it's so wrong in every way, because we know she's not crazy. We know what took her from 0 to 60, right? But my whole philosophy is, if you're at 0 and you take care of yourself at 0, there's no need for you to ever even get to 60, because you're taking care of yourself first and your needs, and you're expressing to your husband in a healthy way. Like, say, we call it board meetings in our community. You schedule an appointment together. It's not a date. You schedule an appointment and say, dates, absolutely, dates are important. But this specifically, once a week or once every 2 weeks, is to sit down.
Don't schedule the board meeting on the date, right?
No, you don't, because dates are for sexy time. Dates are for connecting. Dates are for intimacy and closeness and connectivity. Board meetings are a way that men communicate. They communicate in
Men and me.
budgets.
Yeah, I was going to say, Chelsea does board meetings.
Right, exactly. But it's like my husband coming to me in a calm manner, and instead of saying, you're the reason we have no money because you're getting your hair done and your nails done, he's blaming it all on me, when really I'm going, your business imploded, right? Instead of coming to me like he used to do and blaming me and saying, you need to stop spending money, he said, thank you, Dave Ramsey. He said, we need to fix this. We need to work on this. How can we do this together? So he spoke in a way that resonated to me, right? He didn't come and blame me. So women, we have to speak to our men in a way that will resonate with them as well. Again, if it's unhealthy, if it's toxic,
It's a mute point.
It's what are you going to do? But so my long story long, you guys, is work on yourself, right?
Yeah.
Take inventory on what is going on with you, and be the best partner you can be the best person you can be. And in a lot of cases, like in my community, and there's a men's community that mine is modeled after that's very successful, that a lot of the wives actually are in here, and they say, we noticed the change in them before they even noticed the change in them. So they started being jealous that their husbands were doing all of this amazing work. And they're like, well, what the what? What about us? You're like, we're getting left behind. Yeah. So you will be an example. Hopefully, that's the hope, that you will be the example and they will follow suit. But
yeah, I want to, that's fascinating. And that really resonates with me for sure. And we talk a lot. I think that there's a lot of parallels between, these board meetings, with your husband. And we talk about the Gottman Institute a lot, and John Gottman, and that research. And they always talk about, having a gentle start to how you bring things up, and
Right.
how to sort of properly communicate. But I wanted to know, like, because a lot of the moms that I've talked to, that we've talked to, the whole identity crisis thing has been explained to us as like, kind of feeling like you're like stagnant or at a crossroads, because it's like you, when you don't have a kid, I feel like you can live sort of like almost like I was going to say normal person, but it's like, what does that even mean?
What is normal?
But like, I feel like men and women lead sort of similar lives, like before kids. Like we have to get a job and make money and go to school and find a place to live and become independent. I mean, of course, not everyone. But then when kids come into the picture, it's like the man kind of continues to work and do everything, but the woman has to, take care of the baby because she's breastfeeding and has to recover from birth and everything.
Not has to, but it does generally happen if you just follow social norms.
Well, has to what?
It doesn't have to take care of women or the babies and do all the stuff.
Well, but I get what you're saying, though.
Well, I mean, yeah.
We are the natural nurturers. We are the natural, women are the natural nurturers. Mm-hmm. Men are the natural providers. That's yes, that has been our conditioning. And if you believe in the DNA that comes to us from our genealogy, right? Think about, like, I have in me the trauma from my great-great-great-great-grandmother. Like, that's in me. So her trauma of, and I'm not going to say trauma like, well, maybe, I don't know, whatever, of
the Great Depression,
oppressed by a patriarchy, right? That is in me. So I have little things in me that's like, be independent. Don't let him take care of you. My masculine comes, like, which we got into this, Megan and I, my masculine like comes up and I'm like, versus what I want to do and what I'm allowed to do. Luckily, my husband allows me, is to be in my feminine and be in my nurture. So, but what you're saying is, it actually will get me to my point of my 90-day focus firing and what we do here in the sisterhood. Because I get what you're saying, because before I was married, before I had kids, I had to have a job. I went to school, got a job, got an apartment, got a car. I'm paying bills, right? We're men and women are, I get what you're saying. They're going like this.
Similar paths.
However, I think that there are some differences. I think there's something in us that, and not everybody, these are just such generalities, but for me, I was not sitting down and like writing down all my goals, like pay this bill off by this date. It was just, I have to pay this bill. Each month this bill gets paid. I wasn't sitting down saying, in 5 years, I will be traveling the world. And, I think that there are certain people that naturally do those kinds of things, and they are lucky, and they're more successful. They are inherently more successful just because that is already something they have in their tool belt. It's already been programmed into them, versus a lot of us too that get by on our charm, maybe our charisma, or that just are like, life's going to be good to me because it always has been, and I'm going to get through it no matter what, right? I don't have to make plans. I don't have to. There's different things that go into it. So you're not necessarily honing in on being the CEO of your life, even though you kind of feel like you are, you're not. Mm-hmm. So when I talk to mothers, because I am focusing on a specific niche of stay-at-home moms, working moms, women who prioritize family, so family-centric women. And this is a new concept for this niche, to have community and pay for community and pay for ongoing education that's like coaching, mentoring, right? These kind of concepts are not normal in mom circles. Like, you go to mom groups, you learn about lactation, you meet up at the playground, right? You're not discussing
finding your
Dale
greater
Carnegie.
purpose.
Yeah, you're not discussing Dale Carnegie and Tim Ferriss over the sandbox with each other. You're talking about why your stroller's cooler or why you love this item you just found, whatever. So it's not a common thing. So it does become a societal just norm that you just stop. So we do lose ourselves in motherhood because it does start with that first baby. It does. I happen to not have it because it was at that exact moment that I was given the keys. I was in the driver's seat. So it didn't happen to me, but that is when it happens because that is the absolute first moment when you go, nobody else matters but this human being. I have to give everything, heart, soul, mind, body, spirit, to this person. And you do, and you start to do it to the expense of yourself, right? But we don't think that way. We think we're giving selflessly. We become this martyr. It becomes this badge of honor that I'm willing to go with no sleep, no nutrition, never getting any self-care for myself, never asking for anything. You become this martyr. You really do. You become this Joan of Arc symbol of motherhood. And it honestly probably makes your husband feel terrible because it makes him feel like he's not supporting you, but he doesn't know how to support you because you're not even identifying. Let's start with that. You're not even identifying. You don't even know. You're like an alcoholic. You don't even know that there's a problem. The problem is you need sleep. You need to say, husband, I need sleep. You need to say, I need food. So don't let your body just go all day without eating. You need food, right? So you have to start living your life in a way that is like a CEO. And that is why we created the focused firing method. Firing being like clay. Imagine being fired. So clay goes through the firing process to become a pot. The definition is by applying intense heat and pressure to change it into a different thing. So if you're just like letting life happen at you, you're not getting any intense heat and pressure to change you. You're just drowning. You're just having things just shove you down. But if you're intentionally saying, I'm going to set aside an hour this morning to journal, to meditate, to work out, and then at each meal, I'm going to make sure I'm getting my protein and my blah, 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 whatever, right? If you are doing those things and implementing those things into your daily life, you are applying intense heat and pressure to yourself because you are changing what you've been used to. Society telling you, just do this. You're supposed to do this. Just do this. Just do that. Add this. Now do that, right? You're now controlling it. So, yeah. Does that make sense? Is that kind of where you were going with that? Men continue this, but women are told kind of they're not allowed to.
And I think the key is if you're feeling stagnant, then you could join a group like yours and do the 90-day fire technique where you kind of need to either spend
Reset.
some time and be like, what is it that I need? And then B, you got to really harden yourself and make it happen, and
Right.
it sounds like that's hard enough to do. And probably the success is much higher when you have a concentrated group of like-minded women doing it with you.
Yeah, that
Absolutely.
was my thought too, is I feel like for me, the hardest part was identifying the problem. Like I just knew that something was not right. And I was very confused as to about what it is. And it took me a while to figure out. And it took a lot of introspection, which it's, this 90 days of doing that is certainly going to help. But it's tough, and you have to make time for yourself, and having that support is crucial. Other people that are going through the same thing, also figuring things out. And so I do think that there's a lot of value, because it's not to say that like if you don't get help, or if you don't, get into Tony Robbins, or if you don't do these things, that your life won't eventually work out. Like you might still over time slowly figure it out, or something will happen and you'll go through a mental break. I don't know. But that being said, the purposefulness of
Right.
sitting down, deciding to do it, joining a community, whatever it is, can really speed things up. And I think it gives you that control back so that you don't have to learn as many of the lessons kind of like passively or like by chance or whatever. Like it gives you that control back.
Well, it's like saying, my husband always says books are cheat codes. So just like that, mentors are. It's like if you don't know how to breastfeed, what do? You don't just sit there and keep hoping it works out. You get a mentor. You ask a lactation specialist, right? So why are these ideas of, if you are bad with time management or you're not good at budgeting your money, or why would you not find a mentor to help you with that? Why would you just think it's going to just fix itself? You haven't been able to do it thus far. So this book just had this awesome quote, which is so simple and so obvious, but it's like, if you want something in your life to change, you have to change something in your life. It's not just going to keep going and just change for you. And that's the definition of being purposeful. Having this purpose-driven life is, I want that. In the 4 weeks to a fresh start. So if you go to revitalizedwomanhood.com, I have a free 30-day email series that is a baby steps introduction to the 90-day focused firing. And it is, the first thing you have to do is cast a vision. Like, where do you want to go? Where do you see yourself? And that is where every woman that has joined my community gets stuck. They get stuck there because they can't see further than, like I said, for me too, then I want to have a good marriage. I want to have happy kids. I want to not stress about money. Okay, well, that's great. I love that. Let's start there. That's where we all start. Let's start there. What does a good marriage mean to you? I guarantee it's different than what it means to me. What do you expect out of your marriage? Is it sex 3 times a week? Is it sex 1 time a week? Is it sex 10 times a week? Is it like, I don't know, right? Is it a date night twice a week, prioritizing each other? Is it your husband is cooking dinner twice a week? You have to open your mind to, I say, get a list. And on this column, you go through your day for the next couple days, go through your day and write down all the things that you just love, that are fun, that make you happy, bring you joy. Mine is like making my coffee, putting on a cute Lulu outfit, going to the gym, doing, like the dumbest things that we're doing anyway, but what brings you joy? Like actually pay attention. Getting up an hour early and having the house to myself and nobody touching me and nobody bugging me, and I can scroll on Instagram, I can get on Netflix, like that just brings me so much joy. So identify those things. And then in column B, what bugs the shit out of you? Okay, like what do you hate doing? Like mine was the rug in the living room. I just took my own dang advice and got rid of that 20-year-old rug while my husband was out of town and put a cute, nice new one in. And the amount of just serotonin that lifted in my body from that stupid thing, the light fixture in my bathroom, 40 years worth of dust on that thing. Had someone come and change it out, put a new one up from Amazon. I'm like a whole new person. Okay. But identify these things. What is bugging the crap out of you? Fix those things. If you hate making dinner, tell your husband, listen, I hate making dinner. So can we get a door delivery box thing and the kids help, or you take over 2 times a week or whatever. But you have to take control. Someone has to hand you the keys, or you have to grab the keys for yourself, and you have to become the driver of your own life.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on our podcast and chatting with us. If this episode inspired you, you guys can connect with Gina on Instagram at Revitalized Womanhood, or explore her sisterhood community at revitalizedwomanhood.com and, get more support and connection with other like-minded women. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you guys. I love it. Thanks.
I'm pumped. I'm ready to be my best self now. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on future conversations. And follow us on Instagram at Raising Mama Podcast for more updates, resources, and a peek behind the scenes. See you next time.